Hi everyone, it's Leigh with Arts Council OKC Creative Aging Program. And today we're going to do a watercolor technique called wet on wet, and we're going to use butterflies. So today basically is just about getting comfortable with doing the wet on wet technique. It's not necessarily about getting symmetry with butterflies, but it's just to get comfortable with using watercolor in a little different way. So the materials you're going to need are a pencil, watercolor paper, watercolors, paintbrushes of various sizes, an eraser if you need it, paper towels, and of course water. And what I like to do is, and you can make up your own butterfly shapes if you want. If you'd like, you can get online and look at photographs of butterflies, whatever way works for you. And like I said, feel free to make them up as you go. Any color is totally fine. This is just an introduction to a different kind of technique. All right, well, let's get started. So I just wanted to kind of talk about these initially. You can see that these are really pretty fluid, and there's, even though this one is based on an actual type of butterfly, it's not exact. Now this one isn't finished either, but just the layering in of the colors is, really soft and not precise, and that's the whole point of the wet on wet, where we're wetting the paper first and then using, the loaded wet brush with watercolor on it. Now this is also about patience and letting the watercolor flow. So, we're not, like I said a little bit ago, we're not worrying about exact symmetry. You can kind of have the same sort of a little bit of a pattern, but not necessarily. On this one, I've done the underpainting where I have the base color, and I'll show you a little bit more about this in a minute. And then on this one, I started with the light blue underneath, and then you kind of let your paper relax and dry, and then, you add a little bit of your next color. So what's helpful in doing this is knowing kind of what colors you do want to use, because a lot of this is going to be blending colors as you go while it's still wet. And you want to make sure that they're colors that you like or that you think will blend well. Or, you can also make sure you have a definite amount of, leaving the paper in between the colors so they're not totally blending and blurring immediately while you're laying in the colors. Okay? So, I'll show you a little bit about, I'll build up a little more color on this one in a little bit, but what we'll do first is we'll kind of start from the beginning, where we'll start lightly sketching a butterfly shape, and then we'll start adding some color. So to kind of show you where I'm starting from, this is a photograph of a butterfly that I printed out. And because butterflies in nature are so amazing and interesting color combinations. Now I like this where it's black and blue and all these interesting colors. So I just did a really light sketch, which you can probably not see overly well, which is fine because we really kind of want to keep this very light pencil underneath, just to kind of give you an idea of where you want to keep everything. And I didn't even denote where the, dots are on here, because we're just going to kind of make them up as we go. I basically am just using this for reference for color and kind of style and shape of the butterfly itself. And then I did sketch in a little bit of the flower in the background too. So I just wanted to kind of show you what I'm basing this on. And then what you want to make sure is move your paper, that your reference image, so that it's not underneath your paper that you're going to be painting on, because you don't want to get water on your on your reference image, because that would ruin it. Okay, so I kind of moved the reference image out of the way, and I have this one in here. So I've got various sizes of brushes, and I have my water, and I have paper towel for blotting, and have some extra cups of water. So basically, and now remember, and you know, and I always like to use paper towels. I have one on my leg, one over here, one right next to the watercolor. So I do like the coloring in this photograph. So I'm going to kind of in keeping with that. But remember, when you're starting with, starting with the underpainting, you want to use a lot of water. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of, I kind of have color on it already. I'm just going to kind of float in here with a little bit. And where I am, I'm just kind of making little circle marks with the brush so that you can see the paper underneath. And I already kind of farted that up, so that's okay. Don't worry, I'm gonna take a dry brush and pull some of this off, and it'll be fine. So you want a little bit of color on it, possibly, not necessarily. I'm just kind of coming in here with a lot of, and so this is really kind of just kind of keep giving you an idea of kind of where you want some things, and there's no really exactness about this. Like I said, I'm just kind of, and like in here we have a little bit of stripe, so I'm just kind of going in and just giving little segments to the body and adding just a little bit of color. But my brush is really wet, barely any color on it, and so I can do this for the little legs, just so that, and then like the antenna. And now you may not want to do the antenna yet, because if you're going to use any kind of light color paint, you don't want to, you know, paint over black and have it stretch out. So now what I'm going to do next is, I like this kind of blue, so I'm going to add a bit of blue with some kind of dark blue. You can mix your blues a little here. And so I'm just going to kind of add some, this is not exactly, some blues underneath. And, you know, so you can change, this is a little easier so you can see how I'm just kind of moving the brush around so it's wet. So I'm really kind of, this is kind of a hybrid. It is wet and the paper's a little bit wet, but not exactly. I'm just using a lot of water on my brush, because sometimes if you wet everything down a whole lot, the paint moves more than you'd like, and we're trying to have a little bit of control. So, and you can see I'm adding more, you know, areas where you can see the paper through, and of course I'm changing the colors a little bit, but that's okay because I'm going to go over it with dark. I just want you to get comfortable with, you know, kind of painting spontaneously. Okay, and so with water and, you know, paint, and just kind of relaxing into it and letting it flow. So what I'm going to do is take this blue and actually kind of go around some of the areas that I had done with the really light gray, which you might not have really been able to see much at all. So what I'm kind of going in here and doing is just kind of pushing it around and going over some of the areas that I did. But since the gray was so light, then I can kind of reclaim some spots that I really wanted to have the paper show through. And then to just make sure you know where the edge of your one wing is. And I'm going to kind of come in here and do this so I can say, oh yeah, here's the edge of this one wing. And then here is the edge of the other wing. But anyway, so you can kind of see the idea. It's using a lot of water on your brush and just a little bit of paint, and then you just keep moving it around. But then, you know, and then you have to blot it some if you want, if you get too much water on there. And then also you can go in with water and soften things. But the nice thing about keeping it really light initially and using water but not just totally flooding it, your layers of color are going to dry, so you can kind of work on this more quickly. So here's, and you know, we've got this underpainting of this blue, because what I like to do is, instead of, even though this is a lot of black on here, it has blue underneath. So we're putting this blue down on top of that gray, and then we're gonna come in a little bit and add some darker colors, but we wanna do this in a slow, kind of methodical way, even though we're kind of making it up as we go, which is really kind of fun. So it's just a different way of doing it. So what I'm doing now is I'm just gonna kind of come in here with some green. And I'm really just soft, you know, just lots of water, and I can add a little bit of the lime green in here if I want, and just to add some for this part of the stem of the flower. Well, and we can continue doing yellow like this is, or you can kind of change it, but I'm just gonna kind of come in here, and I'm just gonna kind of, with a lot of water, I'm loaded on my brush, and just kind of come in here and just, so this is not about exactness, but it's just kind of getting in your basic shapes. And this also lends itself really well to how watercolor is lots of layers of kind of transparent color, translucent really. So, and this is keeping it from getting too opaque. We're just using a lot of water, and then we can build the flower out behind it. And so we're just adding some, and I'm, you know, see, I'm just moving my brush kind of quickly, but kind of keeping the shape. And see, this way where I'm going over the antenna, since it's just in pencil, then that's great, because then we're not dragging any, you know, color with it, so any of the black with it. So, and then you can bring this over, and you know, I know that there's some flower back here, so you can either put it, you know, add more yellow down there, but you're not. And the nice thing about watercolor is if you get too much paint, that's fine. Just blot your brush off and then just move it so it's still really subtle in the background. Okay, so this is about, you know, adding nice bits of slow layers of color. And now I know this seems really busy, and we're going to, you know, cut down on some of those shapes. Well, and so you can add some if you don't want to just immediately come in here and do black, because black is really hard to take back. So if you want to, you can start with the darker blue, you know, and just kind of do, oops, I got some black in there. Or if you do want to use black, just use it really sparingly, because black goes a long way. So we can kind of, because I know this part wanted to be mostly black, so. And you can still kind of, you know, and then see how I have water down, and then I'm just letting the paint, I'm kind of pushing it with the brush, but I'm relaxing about it. I'm just letting it flow. I'm not trying to make it do a specific thing. And that's kind of the thing about wet on wet, is you have to just relax and let it flow where the water goes. And then when it dries, you can kind of refine it, but especially if you're using something heavy like black, you just kind of want to let it flow where it wants to. This is a good exercise in patience and breathing. So we can, and all right. And I just wanted to show you about how we can start filling that in, and it's a really deep black, but it has the blue underneath, so it doesn't necessarily seem as flat as if you're just painting straight black by itself. And so what we can do right now is I'm gonna jump in here and take some of these other colors and just kind of drop them in these places. And I'm dotting it on here because I don't want it to be flat. you know, like if you do a straight line with it, it's going to kind of flatten the color out. So I'm just kind of bouncing around and doing a bit of this green. And like I said, you know, I'm not really worrying about getting it exactly like that, the other image. I just liked the color combinations, so. And then you can, once you get in here, even if you're looking at a photograph, you can totally change your mind. So, and if you also, if you think, oh my gosh, that is a ton of black, I don't know if I like it that stark, then dry your brush off. And, you know, pull some of it off. But black is very fast and, you know, it holds really well. So you'd have to do this before, you know, before I'm doing it right now. But you can still take some of it off, get a little water on it, blot it on the paper. Oops, hello. My brush just decided to fall off. But that's okay. Just keep going. And that way, even if it's still mostly black, we're still, it's not solid, so we're kind of changing the opacity of it. So it has a little more visual interest than just flat black, okay? So, and then what I'm gonna do continuing while this is drying is add some of the other colors in here. Add some kind of reds in here. I'm just kind of, like I said, just blotting it in here. Oops, I think I used the wrong color, but that's okay. Just keep going. Looks kind of like a Christmas tree a bit, but that's all right. Yeah. And, you know, like I said, sometimes the color choices you make initially, you kind of think they're a good idea. Even in a photograph, they look great. But if what you're doing you don't necessarily like, then you can totally change it up. So, nature has a way of making colors look really easy. Color combinations. So, anyway. Let's see, I'm gonna use this. Okay. Well, not that you can see that. I think I made the other blue a little too light, so now I'm gonna change it and make this blue a bit darker. And so I'm just kind of bouncing around, and still I have a nice amount of water on my brush, but I have enough color so that it's noticeable. And as you can tell, I'm not outlining it the shape. I'm just kind of dotting it on the paper. Oh, well, that's not enough. And some of you, I think, will really like this technique where it's very loose and fluid, and I think some of you probably won't. But the good thing is that you're trying it, and it's something different. And then you can blend some other green in here too if you want, just for a little something else, a little lime or green. Okay. And so you can add, I'm going to add a little bit of this darker blue in here and kind of go over some of where we've been. Just kind of adds another, you know, a little more depth. Okay, so now you can take a smaller brush. I'm going to use a little more black too, because I like this. It has high contrast, because you do eventually want to go over and have some, you know, lights and dark contrast. I'm doing but just You know, like I said, it's a lot easier to start off lighter and then add lighter with more water and less pigment, and then when it dries, continue then just to keep adding a little bit more pigment, less water for your details. Here again, he has some yellow undertones, in which case I most likely, but I can add this in here. And you can, you know, and it's okay if it kind of blends a little bit, so it's not this perfect yellow. But if you blend it too much and you don't like it, then just blot with your paper towel. And you can take, that'll take a little bit of the black off, but you can go over this with water to kind of get it to tone down, and then you can blot it again to kind of keep it from being so stark. And I know you're not used to really seeing black butterflies, like heavily black, but that's kind of what's fun. So if this is a bit much for you, then, you know, starting out, I wouldn't use, you know, the black then. So, still, this is kind of a little more, sorry, my allergies are, sorry for all the sniffling. And so you just can kind of go over things a little bit more at a time. So we're really kind of doing loose watercolor here. And then if you want to make sure you kind of, if you like certain shapes, then go in with a smaller brush if you're trying to fill in where the black is going to go. And then I'm still, you know, being very loose about it, but this way it's smaller, so I have a little more control if I want to make sure I don't accidentally go over too much of the color. You know, you can butt it right up next, or kind of let it float and have a little bit of blue still around it. And I'm just kind of having fun with, I like, you know, just making random patterns, but if that really bothers you, then you can have a little more, not too regimented, but, you know, you can say, okay, I want one big circle here, that kind of thing. But this way it's kind of fun just to kind of make it up a little bit. You know, I like to challenge you all. So I'm gonna come in here, and I still use a lot of water. It just flows differently with a small brush. Sometimes it kind of, to me, gets a little too heavy, but that's all right. And I'm still gonna leave a little bit of white or a part of the paper in between, because these are both, you know, where the wings kind of overlap a little bit, because then I want to go in and do some blue in there. So, and you can, and then I want to make this a little bit darker in here, since this is the edge of that one wing. But it's just a slow build-up of color, and, you know, like I said, it's a lot easier to do layers of light color, you know, or light washes, and then slowly build up to darker, you know, because you can't, once it dries, you can't really take the dark off of the paper very well. You can't paint light over dark in watercolor, so. But you can see it's starting to come together. And then if you want it to be a little more segmented like the actual butterfly, that's fine. And we'll kind of go in here and then just be aware when things are wet, you kind of want to let them dry a little bit. And this has a few little black spots that are popping down in here too. But like I said, I've done this a little differently than what the actual image is. So just kind of do it how it feels right to you. And you know, and the thing with the wet on what you just kind of let it float where it goes, and then not worry about too much about exactness, but easier said than done. And you know, and then sometimes your picture ends up looking different than, you know, what you intended, and that's all right too. So, okay, I want to take a little bit off. Now this one, you know, all right. Okay. So I'm going to let this one dry a minute, and I'll let this sit a minute and work on it a little bit more, and then I'll come back and wrap it up. So here's an example of kind of best laid plans, in that, you know, we were starting out really kind of light, and then just kept adding darker because I liked the way the actual butterfly looked. But the thing about trying different techniques in watercolor and different mediums is that, you know, part of it is just a learning experience and experimenting and just getting more comfortable with your materials. So, you know, on this one, this has all the nice base coat, so, you know, base layer. So then what you can do is choose your next color and then just add, you know, fluid, kind of more translucent colors on top. So, you know, like this one right here, it did like reds underneath, and so it has a nice slow build up, and still, even though some of the colors became more opaque, it's still really pretty fluid and translucent. So, and ultimately it just depends on how you want your butterfly to end up. This one is still really pretty light, and the color and the flower color is still very light, so that the, you know, butterfly has all of the contrast, so it's really a focal point on the butterfly. On this one, it managed that way too because of the heavy black, so you can still see a lot of variation in it, and you can add a background or not. So just really, I know this is a different kind of, you know, different way of using your watercolor, so really just have fun with it and experiment. And you know, as this one, you know, this one has more it's still the same technique, but I left a lot of white of the paper showing through. You know, I'm not finished with it, I'm slowly adding darker colors, but this has more of the actual patterning of the butterfly itself. And then this one is similar to, it's the same kind of butterfly, but it's much looser. So just really kind of have fun with it. Don't be too hard on yourselves. Just really embrace the different kind of technique of watercolor, where you're using a lot of water, pushing things around, and then you can tighten it up, like as this one ended up being a lot tighter and less fluid, which is totally fine. Just kind of have fun with it and enjoy experiencing something new. All right, we'll see you next time.